Okay, this is daf 40 in the middle. The Alter Rebbe continues, and he says, now, what is it that Moshe Rabbeinu meant to request when he said, quote, V'ati yignal na chulu, kasher dibarti lemor, erech apayim. And now, please show me your great strength as you spoke, saying that you are long-suffering. Now, the pasuk says in Bereshis that Hashem placed human beings, man, into Gan Eden to work it and to guard it. That is, to draw down greater godliness into Gan Eden, that it should be apprehensible by human beings, that they should sit there and benefit from it. And this is achieved, of course, through Torah, which is called the strength, because the origin of Torah is in the level of Chachma that is otherwise hidden, which can then be expressed as it's developed into the Midas, and through that it's revealed in Gan Eden. Now we are told that we are told that Malchus of Atzilus becomes the Atik of Bria, that from the level of Dibor, for example, we get thought. So somebody tells you something, and now you can think about it. So it's his Dibor, it's his expression of self, and it's becomes the thoughts of the person higher. Like it says that Hashem spoke all of these words, saying that it becomes the level of the world, which is called Atik. Now there's Atik within Bria, as we know from the Kavana there becomes Atik of Bria, like we know from the Kavana of when the pasuk says V'yidaber Lakim is called Var Me'ela Lemor, that it becomes hidden, that it becomes the Atik of that level. There's an Atik in Bria, which, as we know, is intended in the Baruch Sha'amar, which is said before the Shemona Esrei. And nevertheless, it's also the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim. But that's the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim in the level of Biyah. And then you have the Shemona Esrei, where we say, Vayavar Hashem, and that's Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim that I mentioned after the Shemona Esrei, which is the Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim of Atzilus. And from the level of those Yud Gimel Midas HaRachamim from Biyah that we say in Baruch Sha'amar, we're drawn down into Gan Eden, and this is through Torah, which is the term of dibor or speech. And this is what Moshe Rabbeinu asked when he said, that just like through Torah there became dibarta and lemor, so too through the mitzvahs there is this expansion of keich Hashem, that the mitzvahs that are drawn down from Adnei, which is the rules, like we say, Dina de Malchusa Dina and Adnei being connected, it's Hashem as the issuer of the statements and the rules, which is rooted in the skull, which is higher than the brain, like the analogy of throwing a stone, that a person reveals his power in the capacity to launch the stone. So to Moshe Rabbeinu requested that we should reveal Keich Adnei, this power of Hashem, which is in the Keser Varachan. Because in mitzvahs, we have two levels. We have the mitzvah itself, that through this, it draws out and it becomes a total unity via the material item, the esrog and the shofar. But that's not yet an avodah, because there's some explanation to it. So it's comparable to it being a refuah or some other type of school. But in the level where we have of mitzvahs hamelech, it's simply the dictate of the king, and there is no explanation. Here, there is no real yichud. And together with this, we are commanded, if we were to be commanded to chop wood, for example, something that seems to have no purpose, we would do it with the same enthusiasm simply because it is the instruction of the king. And we don't have to ask for any explanation. We simply accept our obligation. That since the mitzvah itself is exclusive and is uplifted like Hashem, it is the level of the skull that surrounds the intellect. The purpose of this union with the creations is because it is simply the instruction of the king. Like we say, he is the king who is uplifted. Hamelech hameremer. If so, we automatically understand that it is not possible to draw down godliness into this world simply through Kabbalah soul, that it's necessary for there to also be some alignment with Hashem. That is, it's meaningful because Hashem has dictated. And this is what our sages say, that a mitzvah does require some degree of kavanah. What is that kavanah? That I'm doing it for a mitzvah. I mean, if I'm just doing it by rote and I'm not even aware that I am fulfilling Hashem's dictate, then how can I anticipate or expect that it would bring godliness into the world? And this is that phrase of koyach adni, the power of Hashem, that there's two levels. There's adni, Hashem, the master, and then there's the koyach adni. One is the malchus of Atzilus, and the second is the malchus of Ein Sof. Like we says in the Zohar on the pasuk, Im Aveinos Tishmar Ka Hashem Miyamid. That this seems odd, that we're referring to Aveinos, Averas, and yet we say that the Averas reach to Yud K, to the level of Hashem that is comparable to the father-mother relationship that is prior to the production of the child. And yet we say that Adni, which is Hashem, the ruler, which is much more pedestrian, much more expressive, what we would call lower, and yet that is going to stand us in its good stead. How is that possible? That Adni could correct that of Yudke. But now we explain that Adni is the Malchus, the expression of the otherwise hidden Chachma, and this is Adni. That we say, mi yamid, who will stand? It is something unidentifiable, like the inquisitive who. It's higher even than Atzilus and is hidden. And this is what we mean when we say, it is together with you that there is forgiveness, the 10 depths that we know about. And this is Moshe Rabbeinu's request, she yigdal, it should be expressed, this power of Adni, this malchus, this expressive quality of what is otherwise hidden in the Adni of Atzilus. And the Zohar points out that when it says Ach Miyamoid, and the Moshe Zukato explains that the Aleph Dalid, the Adni, is the Dikna of Arech Anpin. And this is what we have now explained, that is the Malchus, the expressive quality of the Chachma that is otherwise hidden. And the Malchus of Chachmis Dima is the Or that surrounds that first tikkun of the 13 Tikkunei Dikna, what are called the hairs of the beard, or the very shallow expression, which receives from the corners of the head, the payas, which is the malchus of the skull. And this is that level from Min HaMeitza Karosika. And that's why it comes out that it is drawn out exclusively through the submissive Kabbalah soul. Now, when we say Mi Yamoid, who will stand, the Moshe Zukato explains that this is a reference to Bina of Ata. And it's possible that this is the idea of Koyach Adni, based on what we say, that Adni, me, who, that is this level that is unknowable, that is called the Koyach of Adni. And again, Alter Rebbe quotes other sources in the Zohar, the idea that Yaakov surrendered 28 of his own years to give to David HaMelech, again, David being the quality of Malchus. And this is that idea that we say, recognize it from the davening, it's originally in Yechezkel, Baruch Hashem im koimai, that kavod is the quality of Malchus, that he is expressed and blessed from his source. And this is that level of Yignal Na Keach Hashem and the idea of Oisei Dvara. That concludes this part of the Maimer. We continue. We're on Daf Mem Amud Aleph. In the Parsha of Nesachim, about the libations, it says, when you enter the land of your dwelling, Vasisem Isha LaHashem Oila, you will make a fire to Hashem as an up offering and good. Now, the Alter Rebbe asks the question, why does it refer to Eretz Yisrael here as Eretz Moshe, the land where you dwell, whereas it's commonly referred to simply as the land of Canaan? Now, the Gemara tells us that whoever recites the Shema without wearing tefillin, it's as if he has brought an Oila offering without the Mincha, or a Zevach without the Nesachim. But our question is, what does one thing have to do with the other? Why is this an apt comparison? So the Kabbanis, we explain, is that we draw down a fire from heaven onto the altar that consumes the offering and all of the fats. So too the idea of Kriya Shema, that a person who is a combination of the 4 primary elements, fire, air, water, earth, that these are inanimate, vegetable, living, and communicative human being, the 4 letters of Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, from which we draw down and create the world. Like it says, the fire is the quality of the living animal. Now, the pasuk says that the srafim, the fiery angels, stand, that there is a level of malachim and living holy beings that are called srafim because they come from fire. And they are constantly standing in continuous inflamed character because they have one thought all of their days from creation, that they yearn to grasp the ziv of the Shekhinah that gives life to everything from nothing into something. And therefore, day and night, they are never quiet because they have this singular, fiery, simple desire, which is the fiery desire of the godliness to be subsumed within the oneness of Hashem. Now, a person is a combination of multiple characteristics, all four of them. And he is also invested in a body and in the nefesh achienis. And he cannot stay in this constant yearning all the time. Nevertheless, there is the power of his godly soul to have this thirst that comes from this fiery element, like a fiery flame, even more than from the angels. That even though it is down here, and he's lower than the angels, because down here he's invested in a body and in an animating soul, but the origin of his neshama, every single person, according to their level, that not the entirety of his neshama is not invested in his body, just a glimpse of it. And the source of his neshama remains in the source from whence it was sent out here from the highest levels of Hashem. And the neshama in every generation is that much more profound even than the angels of those stages of awareness. And these are the neshamas that spread out their flame to be invested in the physical world, even though you may not recognize it, but your mazel recognizes it. And mazel, like we know, is from the word to trickle down. That is the source of the neshama that trickles down here into this physical world. And this is because the Jewish people were the original idea of all of creation. That means, just like a person, his one singular thought of his soul is absolutely unified with him more than his speech, which is already separated from him. And he could stop it. He could put his hand over his mouth and be quiet, whereas his thoughts are continuously filling his mind. So too the Jewish people, the source of the neshama, that's the original thought of Hashem that is absolutely unified with him. Like it says, my thoughts are not your thoughts. Nevertheless, a little tiny bit of it we can take and we can understand to understand it a little bit. And in Ishtalshus Olamais, through all these very many levels that it expresses itself, of the neshama to be invested in the body and the nefesh habahamis, it still has the power to rule over the guf and the nefesh habahamis, to remove this passion of his heart for material indulgences that come from the innate fiery element of his existence, that it should be overridden by the fiery passion of godliness that is rested within his heart, that his soul should be subsumed with fire, to be uplifted and brought into the oneness of Hashem, like the distinctive virtue of the fiery flame that's in the power of the nefesh habahamis to be subsumed in Hashem, like the carbon that is burnt by this fiery flame. At every moment that it is constantly desirous to becoming closer and closer to Hashem, because of this, the capacity of the divine fire, that is the passion for God, to override and squash the passion for material things, and thus to subsume it too in holiness. And this is the fire that consumes it. And so too by their karbonos, that the fire of kedusha from above, that is consumed by that consumes the animal, that like the fiery flame that comes and consumes the carbon. Oispace. Together with all this, the fiery flame of godliness, which is somewhat measured and invested within the human animating soul, and therefore, when he engages in it in his human behavior, like a person who gets fired up with anger or jealousy or hatred, and any other type of distorted form of fire, this will cut down on his capacity to love Hashem. Meaning, if a person's fire is directed towards anger and hatred, it can't be simultaneously directed towards godliness. What then is the solution? So the pasuk says, behold, you will radiate your candle, and God will light up the darkness. This means that when a person will instead concentrate on his absolute faith in the one Hashem, that penetrates down to the very depths of his heart, and he will not just remember it in some sort of vague sense, but he will invests himself in an in-depth analysis, this will light up this fiery flame that will fill in all of these gaps and will light up the darkness. Like the pasuk says, although I sit in darkness, Hashem is light for me. This is why we read the Shema twice a day, because within it we explain this type of analysis, that even though it's impossible for a person who is invested in a physical body and an animal soul, and he's primarily engaged in material things, to just turn on this fire and flame, unless he says the Shema. And every day he's got to make the effort for his essential divine fire to become stimulated, and thus to diminish the power of his intuitive animalistic fire and subsume it within Kedusha, until he fills all the days, his 70 or 80 years, and thus he diminishes away the fiery flame of his intuitive nature, which is self-centered and animalistic, and that becomes subsumed within holiness. Now, by the Jewish people, their powers of animalistic intensity are going to be forever, but they can be transformed and become a throne for Kedusha, which is not the case by the idolaters, that their animal souls can be diminished, but they cannot be uplifted. And the measure of a person's life that are given to him from heaven is according to how necessary it is for him to elevate his nefesh achienis, his animating soul. And that's how many times he has to read the Shema, where his objective is not only to override it, but to uplift it in the service of Hashem. Now, the idea of the Kriya Shema is that one should contemplate and think and remember all the time that Hashem, which is Haya, Hoiva, V'Yia, was, is, and will be, is all the same by Hashem. Hashem doesn't have past, present, and future. He is exclusive. And therefore, there is no change, God forbid, in Hashem. He doesn't change from yesterday till tomorrow. Like the pasuk says, I am Hashem, I do not change. He is the same Hashem from before he created the world to after he created the world, because as things come closer to him, they cease to have any significance. And he himself, at this level, is Elokeinu. He is the power of our godliness. He is our personal power that is embedded within us, our capacity, our life force, the source of our neshama. That was the whole purpose of creation, to be subsumed within this infinity of Hashem, which is not the case with any other creation. The source of all those other creations only comes from the level of Melech. Like we say, Baruch shein kavod malchusai li'olam va'ed. Blessed is the name and the glory of his kingdom, and the kingdom is the thing that Hashem dictates. Malchusai b'chol mashallah. Even the highest levels of awareness, the higher worlds, are only malchuscha malchus kol olamim. They only are created by Hashem's level of malchus, that is the pragmatic. And therefore, of course, there's nothing outside of Hashem. Like it says, everything comes from Hashem, and Hashem is Elohim. But the concealment of Elohim is concealing the level of Havaya. Nevertheless, what the rest of the world and all of creation, and even the higher worlds and the angels get, are only a slight glimpse. And even this is only a tiny insight into that level of godliness. Like we say with the letter Yud, Hashem created Olam Haba, which is just a slight ray, an insight, like the tiny letter of the Yud, which is the smallest of letters, which represents human thought, which is only a tiny little spark. But the source of the Jewish neshama is absolutely rooted in the life force of the infinite of Hashem. Like it says, Hoidu al eretz v'shamayim. His glory is on the heavens and the earth of the Jewish people, his close nation. And this is what it means that it says that God made man upright. This means he is straight, that he is above, down here like he is above. That is like a straight line from top to bottom. Like explained in other places on the pasuk, Likkutei Hashem yesharim. The instructions of Hashem are straight. That is, they draw down like a perfect wire that communicates from top to bottom. And this is what it means again, Adam Yashar, and so on. And like it says in Koheles, in the Medrash in Koheles, that it says that indeed man is like one of us. This is in Bereshis after they eat from the fruit. And it says in the Medrash that man is like one of us. Rabbi Yehuda says that he is like the singular one of creation. One, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And this is like we pointed out before, that this power that is given to us to have this direct connection, this Yosher, not through any necessity for a shtalshlus or any other intermediary, not even through the helam of the other names, which is not the case with the other creations, which are called the hosts of heaven, that they are drawn down through the hishtalshlus and other concealments, to the point that they are not called even a shefa, except through these other names, because the light in the shefa that is holds them back. And then they have some sort of discharge, some sort of gift through this hishtalshlus. We could say that this is what it means when it says that we are Yisrael, Yashar Kel, that his Kel is the power, and that is drawn down, Yashar, straight, a direct line. And this is what it means, Ashrecha Yisrael Micha Am B'Havaya, that is, that the power and strength is Micha Moicha Be'elim Hashem, this power of Yudke Vavke. And the Alter Rebbe points us to the Rabbah. This is a reference to Atik Yomin and other source material. Well, what we get out of all of this ultimately is that the power that is revealed from Shem Havaya is far beyond the power of any other name. And this is what's explained when it says, V'ata yignal na keach admin. And this that we explain, that when we say Yehesh made up with all of our koyach, that again, koyach is the revelation of what is otherwise hidden. As such, Havaya Lekenu was the power and the strength of the neshama. That this is what it means, Elekenu, that it is drawn out from Atzmas of Shem Havaya. That this itself is the source and power of all neshamas. And this is what it means when we explain at the end of the Maimer V'Yidaver Elavram, that I know that Hashem will be to me an Elokim, that is this level of Havaya, which is so exclusive, it itself will be to them a level of Elokim, and it will dwell amongst them. And regarding this, we say that it tells us in the Medrash Rabbah on the Parshas Veschan on the pasuk Asher Elikim Krev Melav, that they are the nation that are. It doesn't say Asher Lo Goy Karav, the nation that is close, but it says that God is close to them. End quote. We explain that what this is a reference to is that Elokim, the way it is drawn down from Havaya, that is even higher than Elokim. And now we understand why you cannot challenge the Medrash and say, it says, Asher lo goy karev. It doesn't say, because it says, to the Jewish people, they are the close nation. But here it says, Havaya, and there it says, Elokim. And this is what it means when it says in the pasuk, karev elecha hadavar, meaning the davar is the malchus, that davar lemelech. This is the name Elokim, which is karev elecha, like it says, Asher Elokim krev melav. And the Medrash, the end of Parshas Nitzavim, it says in the pasuk Karve Lecha Davar Miyoid that Hashem says to the Yidden, B'ni, if the Torah will be close to you, then I will call you close, like it says to B'nei Yisrael and Krevet. And the point being, basis we explain in different Maimarim that the Alter Rebbe references here, a few other sources and so forth. And this is ultimately what gets us to Shema Yisrael. That Shema means to come together. By Yishmashal, they gather together. That is, to gather together all of the keiches and the ritzenos of the Yesod Eishativi, that is the natural fire for material things, through uprooting our passion from being in them. That is, to rather sort of regret the past and commit ourselves to the future, never to return to such foolishness. And this is that level of Yisrael who are all of a machshava. And Havaya, which is Elokeinu, Havaya Echad, that is absolutely unified with them. And this is what brings us to this fiery flame. And this is what we mean, V'yahavta b'chol levavcha, b'shnei yitzirecha, the Yetzer Tov and the Yetzer Hara, that the Yetzer Hara, which is the Koyach Yesod Hativi, should be elevated and subsumed in the power and fire of the love of Hashem.